And so all the issues of Phonogram kind of work like this. Each one of them is a look at the events of this night from somebody else's perspective. And as we see more and more perspectives on the night, we learn basically that there are facets to these people and their interactions that we didn't see before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think is so brilliant about it. That it
Definitely.
has that layered kind of interwoven story.
Yeah, like I definitely think that it would be a comic where you'd have to read it 2 or 3 times, and maybe
Yeah.
from different starting points. Like that sort of touches on some of the stuff that me being a fan of Grant Morrison, and like I've read his book Super Gods, where he talks about comics, the creation process, and sort of time. Um, and I feel like to have that book as a graphic novel will set up the story in one way inherently because the way it's bound. To have the 6
Yeah.
issues where you can, you know,
Yeah.
start at 4, then read 1, then read 7 or whatever,
Right.
you could get a really cool look at it. And I think from the medium of comics, one, that's super cool.
Yeah.
I also think the concept of that is fabulous. Like to have, it's obviously slice of life, but it by having them sort of puzzle piece together like that, um,
Yeah.
yeah, it really goes a long way to talk about like exactly how we don't know every bit of everyone's lives. We cannot always see what everyone's thinking or going through or what they even mean. Um, I think it's super cool. That's a great comic.
Right. Right. Yeah. And because like I think it touches on, I mean, this very, each issue kind of touches on, I think, an experience that I can relate to. Penny's self-consciousness and need for external validation finally giving way as she realizes that she's the only one who needs to, she needs to be dancing for herself, not for
Mm-hmm.
other people. Like that's, that story. Then, I mean, Mark, I think anybody who's gone through a bad breakup and has dwelt on, memories of their ex and replayed the relationship in their head over and over again, anybody can sympathize with Mark and understand the way, hearing that song, that familiar song, can send you right back
Yeah.
to that right back to that moment.
Wow.
That it, like, literally this music conjures up the image of his ex for him. That's the magical realism of Phonogram. But then, like, we get other characters, like, without spoiling the individual issues. One of my favorite characters from it, and the main character of the third volume, is a woman named Emily Astor. And to sum up Emily Astor in a sentence is to say that Emily Astor was a typical indie music lover who hated herself so much that she sold half of her personality to the king behind the screen in order to craft a better her.
Wow.
And so she has made herself into this sort of idealized version of what she wants to be. But the person she sees in the mirror is the part of herself that she gave up.
Oh, that's
And like it's great because like that is like that is so on the nose for anybody who's ever tried to change themselves to make themselves like happier, to like be kind, or to
mm-hmm.
try to make themselves into the kind of person they think they want to be, who still struggles with looking back and seeing those memories of who they were, because that
Wow.
haunts you, that follows you. uh, and like, so that's Emily's story. uh,
Damn.
or uh, Laura, who is living in the shadow of her friend Penny because Penny's effortless, and Laura just isn't. And Laura's whole shtick is that she quotes song lyrics nearly constantly, uh, which belies the fact that she is trying to copy other people. She is
Mm-hmm.
trying to, find meaning in words that other people use to craft herself out of. Um,
It's really
and
interesting.
her, yeah, like she loves the long blondes. That's her favorite group in the comic. Uh, and she has lots to say about why she likes the long blondes so much. And then we get Lloyd, who is he's trying so hard to get people to take him seriously. He's 19 and he wears a full suit out to an indie club night and refuses to drink because he doesn't want to be ruled by his vices. And actually, like, I'm going to butcher his name, but do you know how to say the author's name? Kieran
I think
Gillen,
it's Gillen, but it could be
Kieran
Gillen.
Gillen. Yeah. But he actually talks about it in the back of the book, in the sort of author's notes sections, that Lloyd is basically based on himself from a period of his life where he says, "I was about as close to straight edge as you could get, and I really, really probably needed to get laid really badly." um, and I mean, you can see it because like Lloyd is trying so desperately to get people to take him seriously, and he's just all wrapped up in this. He's got this musical project that he's
Ooh.
obsessing over, that he's trying to convince everybody is this great, brilliant idea, and he like everyone kind of listens to him and they're like, "Huh, that's kind of cool," But
Yeah.
nobody is as impressed with it as he wants them to be. Um,
That's fair.
and like he's just so like he's so frustrated, and it's great. It's palpable. Like you can see it on the page.
Yeah.
Um,
Like I think
and yeah,
what I really like about the sound of this comic is, no pun intended. Um, each of those characters, at least half of them so far, I can identify with how they felt at some point in time, and I think
yeah,
for Kieran Gillen, the writer who's done so much, um, to have layered that in such a way that not only are you getting their individual stories, but as you read on, you're getting how it interconnects and what they actually mean. Um, I think there's a lot of power to that, and like that's true
yeah,
form comics. Like that's great.
yeah. No, I think the fact that I can look at this comic and think to myself, I don't just sympathize with these characters. I have been these characters at different points in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can remember agonizing over an ex the way Mark did. I can remember that feeling of just being locked up in my room, listening to the same songs over and over again as I, replay that relationship in my head. I can remember being Lloyd and trying so desperately to sound smart and mature so that people will take me seriously that I just come off as, a pompous ass, like who's trying really hard. Uh, I can remember uh, I can remember being uh, I can remember being Emily and trying really hard to sort of craft this version of myself that I think will be the most likable or impressive. And like, although I remember that in high school, like I remember
Yeah.
giving up hobbies and things like that so that I would, like cutting those things out of my life because I was like, these aren't cool and people will laugh at me or mock me for them, and like the fact that all of these characters are so relatable is one of the things that's brought me back to this comic so many times.
Hell yeah. Like it's it's in the a fantastical way. Um, it is also very much like plain. Like it's like you said, each character almost I bet you literally everyone on the planet can relate to, and I think there's such a
Yeah,
power to that. Um,
yeah,
yeah, it's awesome. And,
and,
okay,
I,
throw
and
up
then
the
I think, yeah,
throw up the cover again, and it's
yeah, absolutely,
Phonogram.
yep, the
That's
Singles Club.
awesome. Who did the art on it?
So this is Jamie McKelvey, who also he's worked with Kieran, I believe it's a he, has worked with Kieran on a number of their projects together. So yeah, like it's a very distinctive art style. Like it's, I don't know how to describe it well, but like I recognize it instantly anytime I seen it. He's done a number of high projects lately. Like been on like let's see. So Kieran's written like Young Avengers and Iron Man as far as like big name comics.
Yep.
And Jamie's been on Suburban Glamour, which was his own project. Young Avengers, X-Men season 1. Like they've both been pretty prolific lately.
Yeah.
So
They've been around the block a few times.
yeah.
That's awesome.
I will say, like, one of the I haven't touched on this issue yet because it's the last issue, and in some ways it's it's not in some ways, it is the least connected of the issues to the rest of it. There's a side character. He's David Cole, the main character from the first comic. David Cole has a friend, this sort of perennial hanger-on who shows up anytime David needs help and just kind of drives him around or gets into trouble with him. And he is notable because in this comic about phonomancers, he is the only normal guy. He doesn't have magical powers. He's not, and his name, as it were, is Kid with Knife. That's what everyone calls him. He's Kid with Knife, KWK.
Okay.
And he's just sort of like this. He's this. I'm not even sure what English stereotype to call it. He's got like buzzed hair and wears a hoodie everywhere and like gets stoned and drinks a lot and like drives and gets violent basically. But the final issue is Kid with Knife's perspective on the night, and he's done nothing throughout the whole thing except basically be there, party, and drink. He shows up late to the singles club, and that's what he's doing.
Huh, all right.
And so the final issue starts off with Kid with Knife talking to the reader, saying basically that he sat down with his friend David. And he said, like, show me some tricks. Like you talk about this phonomancy whatever stuff. Show me something. Like just a little something. And he says David told him, okay, pick a song. Doesn't matter what, just that it matters to you. Put it on, crank it up. Listen to it on repeat and let it fill you up until it's filling every single cell of you. And when you feel that, just inside, hold on to it and ride it as long as you can. And Kid with Knife turns to the camera and he says, I said, shit, that's magic? Everyone does that. And then what follows is the splash page, which says, Wolf Like Me, a song by TV on the Radio. And then what follows is the entire rest of the issue has zero dialogue as Kid with Knife goes on an like absolute bender around town on his way to the club night. Like his speech bubbles are replaced with pictographs.
Oh, cool! All right.
So when he shouts at some punks who are harassing a couple of like emo kids, and he shouts at them, and his invectives are replaced with pictographs.
Oh my god!
Which, like, if you take a second, like, you can absolutely read what he's saying. Like exactly what he's saying, and we see his eyes glowing, throughout the whole night as he's writing this song, which Wolf Like Me is obliquely about being a werewolf, but it's this animal inside. And yeah, the whole issue is him just like running around, giving these punks the slip. They chase him to the club, and he's doing all this stuff. He stops and he gets a kebab and he sneaks it into the club and meets up with his friends to party. And then we find out at the very end, to tie the whole thing back together, that as Penny kind of blinds out the dance floor, we've heard vague references to somebody else dancing with Penny, we find out that it was Kid with Knife who goes and dances with Penny, and he goes home with her, and they have
cool.
sex. And that's the ending.
That's awesome.
Like it is, like, it's amazing, because after this whole graphic novel of these really weird experimental kind of issues, we get an issue with basically 2 pages of dialogue, the first and last page, and everything else is just Kid with Knife's crazy story for the evening.